My name's Christina Kendall. I've been John Stossel's executive producer at Fox Business since he came there from ABC. I was his producer at 2020 for many years before that. In the James Bond movie, The World Is Not Enough, Electra King says to James Bond as he's kind of torturing, he's taking her away. She says, "I could have given you the world." And Bond says, "The world is not enough." And Electra King says, "Foolish sentiment." And Bond says, "No, family motto." So tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce someone with a similarly principled family motto. Although maybe in his case, instead of "the world is not enough," his family motto might be called "the Constitution is enough." According to the New Republic article just out this week, Senator Paul has a reputation as an eccentric. He does crazy things for Washington, and I'm quoting here, like wandering alone into the cafeteria, buying his own coffee, and getting his own lunch. Shocking. That article goes on to note that he has introduced a budget that would have eviscerated the Department of Transportation, Energy, State, Commerce, the EPA, the FDA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. It would have defunded the Department of Education, the Housing and Urban Development, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Government Printing Office. Now, I've worked for John Stossel for a long time, and I really have not given enough thought to the Government Printing Office, but I'm going to look into that one. It goes on to say that he's offered a triad of bills intended to make senators more diligent: the Read the Bills Act, the Write the Laws Act, and the One Subject at a Time Act. Well, that's enough to make me interested in basically any subject he wants to speak about for as many hours as he'd like, or 20 minutes. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you. Now, they told me I could speak for as long as I wanted to, so I hope you've got a comfortable seat. I can't read my notes, but I can prattle on and on. As my wife says, I can drone on and on and on. Well, I couldn't find my cell phone this morning, so I saw Harry Reid and I said, "Can I borrow your cell phone?" So he let me borrow his cell phone. Do you think the NSA is going to be surprised to see Harry Reid giving your keynote speech tonight? Jimmy Fallon said the president was at a middle school last evening, and he said, "I'm going to bring every middle school in the country high-speed internet." But there was a bit of an awkward moment because some kid raised his hand and he says, "Why? So you can read our email faster?" It's kind of hard being in the opposition party because you've got to be agile. You've got to shift from one scandal to the other. It's sort of like the old McDonald farm of scandals. Here a scandal, there a scandal, everywhere a scandal. And I'm starting to think that their public relations ploy is to displace one scandal with the other. But really, if you say, what is the nexus? What intertwines all of these scandals? It's really a government that is drunk on power. It's a government that has allowed so much power to gravitate to the presidency and as an extension to the bureaucracy. When I ran for office, I thought, well, I'll get to be a senator and I'll have an important role in deciding the laws of the nation. And it turns out the laws are not written by your legislature. The laws are written by the regulatory bureaucracy. And it makes a big difference, but you can't get rid of them. Obamacare was bad enough, 2,000 pages, but the regulations are 20,000 pages. Dodd-Frank's another couple thousand pages, but the regulations haven't been finished, and they're over 5, 6, maybe 8,000 pages. The problem is we've let government get away from us. There isn't a responsiveness. You can't change your representative and change government. That's a real problem. It is about maybe some bad people inhabiting government. I would probably vote that the woman who took the fifth for the IRS may well be a bad person. In fact, she may well have been a bad person for a few decades now, and that has caused her to get promotion after promotion. Turns out she was in the FEC 10 years ago telling a Republican candidate that if he would just renounce the idea of running for office, he would promise never to run for office again, she'd drop the charges. He spent $100,000 defending himself. Anybody in here have a business where they ever had to spend money protecting or defending yourself from your government? Now, I know there have been some complaints about Obamacare, but, really your government just wants to take care of you. They think you're too stupid to take care of you. In fact, I was in a meeting today, and most of it was classified, but I'll tell you the gist of it. Someone in the meeting said, well, the country isn't ready to go to war in Syria, but they just don't understand yet. They're not, he didn't say this, but I characterized this, and then he got mad and things got worse. But I said, look, look, you think the people are too dumb to know whether we should go to war in Syria? It's like, oh, no, they're just not informed enough yet. We know better what is best for the country. But they're going to do it in secret. They don't want to have an open vote. And that's what this whole debate is covert versus overt. Are we going to have a vote on it? Well, the Constitution was pretty explicit. It said that Congress makes these decisions. The president doesn't get to make these in a vacuum. Madison was very explicit. He said, history demonstrates, the Constitution understands what history demonstrates, that the executive is more prone to war, and therefore the Constitution gave that power to the Constitution, to the Congress. It vested that authority in the Congress. And so really what we have here, if you're concerned about regulations, is the same problem we have with foreign policy or war or anything else. Too much power has gravitated away from you, away from your representatives, and to the president. Now, we haven't won many battles, but there are a few, and probably really one in particular that we have won. People said the sky was falling and that the world would end if the sequester came through. I kept saying the sequester wasn't even enough. It was barely a beginning, that it was a slowdown in the rate of growth. If you look at the chart on growth, you can't hardly see a difference between growth without the sequester and growth with the sequester. There's no space between the lines. They both go upwards. And yet the president said the world would end. Woe is me. We have to end the self-guided tours at the White House. We can't have the policemen guard the entrance to the Senate buildings anymore. We've closed half of the entrances to the Senate building. And it's like, where are they? And I asked one of the policemen, I said, have you had to have furloughs? Are you being laid off? He says, no, we've been reassigned. So I'm imagining in my mind this really large room with a lot of donuts somewhere. And actually, that's kind of mean, so I retract that. Because really, we do appreciate the Capitol Police. They do protect us, and it is an important function. But it is kind of ridiculous that you have them on the sidewalk, standing in front of the entrance they used to guard, directing traffic to the other entrance that's open. It's a facade. It's a charade. The president ought to be ashamed of himself for doing it. But the thing is he does it as long as he thinks he can get away from it, get away with it. He's got policemen lined behind him, firemen lined behind him. Does anybody not know they're paid for with your local taxes? They have nothing to do with the federal government, or they ought to have nothing to do with the federal government. But yet he plays this game. But you know what? This is the one thing we've won. We won the game. The world didn't end. He tried to say, I'm going to lay off the meat inspectors. I'm going to lay off the air traffic controllers. People aren't buying it. People know we've got a $4 trillion government, and it's riddled with waste, and they simply aren't buying it. We won that battle. If you would have taken the sequester and instead of just putting it on the discretionary spending, applied it across the board, the budget would be balanced within a few years. I keep talking about the penny plan. Cut 1%, your budget balances within 5 or 6 years. And at first I was incredulous. How could you do that? The reason is because it's going up 5% a year, so in their terms it would be a 6% cut. But we're talking about a baseline of 0, 1% cut balances the budget in 5 to 6 years. We have to be strong enough to stand up and tell the American people, we're going to cut spending. But I think at the same time, we should offer people something that will create more jobs than have ever been created in our country, and that's it. We should have a 17% flat personal and corporate income tax. We don't need any more candidates who propose 500 pages of revenue-neutral tax reform. It's not sexy. Who cares? Who's going to ever knock on a door because someone says, I'm going to give you revenue-neutral tax reform? That just means you pay more and he pays less or she pays less. It's ridiculous. Let's just be for what we're for. Reduce taxes. What's the only economic stimulus ever known to work? Leave more money in the economy. Let's not be ashamed of what we're for. Let's be forthright and say we are for tax reductions. Now, the president said he could never cut. We've cut things to the bone. There's no more spending that we could cut. So I made up a list. It took me about 5 minutes, and I suggested, why don't we not rehire the people who retire? That's $6 billion a year. He waited a year and a half into the sequester. That's $9 billion just by not rehiring people. Let's say we cut travel by 25%. I mean, there's a few less Star Trek conferences for the IRS. Cutting travel's over 25%, excluding the military, so about $2.5 billion. Let's do something really outrageous. Let's have competitive bidding for all contracts for government. Let's get rid of Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage. That saves $10 billion a year. I mean, in 3 or 4 items, I can get to the $40 billion we needed for the sequester in 5 or 6 items. But just in case he wasn't convinced, I gave the president a few other unsolicited ideas for things we could cut. Number one, I think we could do without the robotic squirrel. The scientists had a question, and here was their question. And you know, scientists have a lot of questions. Their question was, will a rattlesnake strike a squirrel that's not wagging its tail? But they couldn't get a squirrel to volunteer not to wag its tail. So they had to create a robotic squirrel that wouldn't wag its tails, and guess what? A rattlesnake will bite the you-know-what out of a squirrel that's not wagging its tail. That cost you $300,000. They also spent $500,000 developing a menu for Mars. If you have any kids, 26-year-old kids of your own living in your basement, you want to get them a job, this is the perfect job for them. Pays $5,000. You have to spend 2 weeks in Hawaii, all expenses paid. And then one of the prerequisites for the kids that were going to participate in this Menu on Mars study is you had to like food. So after 2 weeks on Hawaii, these kids, these college kids that were living in your basement came up with pizza. That was $500,000. We spent $1.8 million developing roll-up beef jerky for the military. I'm not sure exactly what the weapon system is there. We spent $5 million in the military budget studying the collective action of fish. Now, someone tried to explain to me this had something to do with robotics. I just may not be smart enough to understand that, but I have trouble understanding how looking at a bunch of fish in a tank is going to develop a military weapon system. There's $7 billion of research in the military budget that has nothing to do with any military systems. It's put in there because the defense budget always passes, and so why not stick on some stuff into the Defense Department? Happens every year. It's always going to pass. The American people aren't buying it. We're winning this battle on cutting spending. We need to stand firm. The one thing I didn't understand when I came here was I thought, laws had to change to make a difference. The one thing that is absolutely true and why it makes a difference who your president is that we didn't change a lot of laws on the environment. We didn't change a lot of laws on how your businesses deal with the environment, but things changed dramatically simply by executive fiat, by regulatory change, by regulatory law. So it does make a difference who's in charge of the EPA. And from Bush to Obama, there was a big difference in a lot of areas of government. With the IRS scandal, is it one rogue employee? You tell me. The union, the IRS union, doesn't seem like there ought to be such a thing. The IRS union gave $1 million to Democrats and $20,000 to Republicans. And if you look at the list of Republicans, I think they really were Democrats. If you look at all the public sector unions, they gave $30 million to Democrats and a couple $100,000 to, once again, Democrats who have an R next to them. There is a question whether you can get a fair shake from a government employee. Is it a rogue government employee that went after the Tea Party or went after people for religious reasons or went after Gibson Guitar? Remember the case of Gibson Guitar? Turns out Fender Guitar brings in the same kind of wood, but they give to Democrats and Gibson gave to Republicans, and guess who got prosecuted? Turns out that they really weren't prosecuted for anything that had to do with whether or not the wood was endangered or not. They wanted the wood to be processed by labor in India. It was simply a labor protection racket for India. But the most insulting thing about the Lacey Act, if you've not heard of it, is that it is making U.S. businesses subject to foreign laws and foreign regulations. We put a guy in jail, an American citizen, for 10 years for bringing in some crabs from the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Honduras, and they said he broke a Honduran fishing regulation. He brought them in Ziploc baggies instead of cardboard. 10 years in prison. We have a man named, I believe, Ken Lucas down in the southern part of Mississippi. He's in jail for 10 years. His partner's 80. He's got a 10-year sentence. What's their crime? Putting clean dirt on dry land. He's accused of a wetlands violation. But to give him more time, they said he was a conspirator. He was the Al Capone of putting clean dirt on dry land. They included his daughter. She's a nurse and sold lots part-time for his real estate company. She got 84 months in prison without parole. She's got a 2-year-old kid. She's never had a traffic ticket. Your government is run amok when you're putting people in jail for regulatory crime, and I think it's got to end. It's not going to be enough for me or anyone else to convince the business class. The business class, God love you, you're entrepreneurs and you are the backbone of the country, but there's not enough of you. There's always going to be more of the working class. We have to have a message that resonates with everybody. We have to have an opportunistic and a message of opportunity that resonates with those who work for you, which says that their chance to get into the middle class or their kids' chance to become one of you, to be one of the great entrepreneurs of the country, it exists for them. So it has to be this message of optimism that can resonate to everyone. It has to resonate to even those who are on unemployment insurance, those who are in need and not doing well. I've had family members who are down on their luck and have taken government assistance. We have to convey the message, you're not a bad person because you've taken government assistance, but we need to give them a message of hope that they can join the rest of us in the middle class and the successful class and the business class. There's a painter by the name of Robert Henry, and he was giving advice to other painters, and he said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. That's the kind of image we need to proclaim. It's sort of like, the Von Trapp family, the hills are alive. We need to have this optimism, this happiness about our party that is enticing to people. It needs to appeal to people of all races. When we look like America, when we have tattoos, without tattoos, with ponytails, without ponytails, when we look like the rest of America, we'll be a national party again. We need to attract African Americans to our party. I think ideas of justice will do that. African Americans can remember a time when there was no justice for them, when things were incredibly unfair, when the law was unfair and the law was biased. When we talk about issues like indefinite detention, which is supposed to be for terrorists but could be applied to American citizens, that appeals to the sense of justice. When we talk about our drug laws that are imprisoning African Americans at 4 to 6 times white Americans, when we give government grants to police departments and say, base it on your arrest record, and it doesn't take them long to figure out they can arrest more kids in the poor neighborhood than they can in the rich neighborhood, and they can get convictions because the kids don't have attorneys and don't have any money. When we talk about these ideas and issues of justice, I think we'll get a bigger party. We'll get more people coming to us. When we talk about the ideas of privacy, you want your business to be left alone. Kids don't have any money, but they want their internet to be left alone. They want their email to be left alone. It's all the same thing. When we can bundle that all up in a message of freedom, we'll win again and be a national party. Thank you very much.
So, as many of you know, CEI this year got a new problem eliminator. And that's Lawson Bader. Now, Lawson, yeah, that's worth applause. Lawson came to CEI after working at Mercatus for 16 years. At the end of that time, of his time there, he did a lot of jobs there. At the end of the time, he was Mercatus's VP. When Fred officially passed the torch to Lawson, at the beginning of this year, the Washington Post reliable source ran a bit with the headline, "A think tank that knows how to party." Yeah. So it was right after that Lawson called and asked me if I would MC this dinner. Yes. Lawson was quoted as saying, "CEI has fun people, but some of them are crazy." So it's my great pleasure to introduce CEI's new fun, crazy problem eliminator, Lawson Bader.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your principles. What a concept, having them. We did, however, prepare for this in case you didn't approve of the menu. We had every single James Bond movie ready to be shown on the screen on the off chance you needed some entertainment for a long time. When last year CEI began a search for a successor to Fred Smith, as if, of course, that can actually happen. And last fall, I was fortunate enough to be selected, and I'm very honored to actually be working with Fred very closely to ensure the success of this changeover. After 6 months on the job, I am very happy to report nothing. Presidential transition has been devoid of guns, knives, killer drones, and wiretapping of Fred's phone. And while Fred is actually convinced I have secretly installed a trap door underneath his desk, the truth is that he deserves a great deal of credit for doing what too many DC leaders fail to do, which is voluntarily hand over to a successor. Although, as Fred has said before, it was only after I read King Lear that I realized I needed to do this right. Now, let me say, CEI is in a very good place, well-positioned to confront today's widespread challenges to free enterprise, the largest and most expensive government in history, a public that superficially at least seems to somehow accept it, and a president bent on making it even larger. Good times, indeed. But I would not be here if I thought CEI was ill-prepared or unwilling to engage in this important fight. All right, another part of it was I knew CEI would accept a hairy-kneed, skirt-wearing, knife-wielding president who keeps a great deal of single malt scotch in his office and haggis in the fridge. Don Draper's not the only guy with a drinks cart next to his desk. So, CEI, however, is truly more than just a think tank. We combine rigorous policy work with persistent advocacy. We don't just think. We actually project our findings and principles deep into the policy arena and out into the wider world. We are very creative and bright individuals. We like to analyze and write. Okay, we're wonks, but we're good wonks. Better yet, we're good activist wonks. We relish engaging in harassing and shaming and suing. We build coalitions, we file FOIA requests. Without any thought to our personal safety and image, we broadcast our message far and near. We are basically a blend of the ivory tower and the island of misfit toys. And tonight, what we really do is we celebrate what CEI has truly become. A group that believes in liberty, loves liberty, and is one of liberty's most steadfast advocates. And CEI is sorely needed, yes? These are frustrating times. In the midst of one of the worst economic crises in modern history, Barack Obama and his allies continue to convince that Washington, D.C. is a better steward of Americans' life and liberty than Americans are themselves. And the argument has prevailed. But that argument, that narrative may be fraying a bit. For now, we find the IRS targets groups for ideological purposes. Shocker. Heck, the House just defeated a ag bill. And of course, the NSA monitors our communications, but to be fair to the NSA, I suspect they've actually outsourced its eavesdropping capabilities because, frankly, they got a little tired of listening in on Fred's phone calls. I mean, seriously, have you ever been in on some of those phone calls? Our job now is to channel that dismay, and this is a recurring theme tonight. There's a reason for that, but to challenge that dismay over these abuses into what essentially is red-hot anger of what the real Potomac monster is. And that's namely the overgrown and overexpanding federal administrative state. In our recent publication, 10,000 Commandments, we estimate its total cost at $1.8 trillion, much of it borne, of course, by families and small businesses. But it's not just a financial burden. It's the lost opportunity. It's the compromised safety that these agencies and their regulations cause. The new medicines that never get to patients, the loss of consumer choices in the marketplace, and the innovative technologies that could make our world safer and healthier and more productive rejected by regulators simply because they're new. And the absence of restraint on this administrative state means that nearly 4,000 of these rules are issued with minimal congressional oversight, no oversight really at all. It's evidence enough, frankly, that efforts like the REINS Act, which Senator Paul has played a role in, is an important and much needed piece of legislation. Now, we all know what to expect during the next 3 years. In 1980s, Ronald Reagan said, "It's morning in America." Under President Obama, it's midnight, or rather, it's a perpetual midnight regulation. And he has signaled his willingness to bypass a gridlock Congress and use that regulatory process to cement his vision of a pervasive nanny state. And frankly, each of us here needs to challenge this. Whether you are an individual supporter, a business contributor, a think tank ally, each of us must intervene or this trend will continue. And we will find ourselves so far down the path of paternalism that any glance back will only be nostalgia. So, what is CEI's contribution? Well, we apply ideas and reports, but when those proposals every now and then are ignored, well, we just sue the hell out of the U.S. government. Just ask the EPA, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, or our politicized friends at the IRS. Now, as we go forward, CEI is the link between the state we have and the liberty we deserve. And that is why we will defend your constitutional right to eat not just one, but 2 donuts. One for you and one for liberty. And then to wash it down not with 16 ounces, but a 17-ounce soda. Thomas Jefferson said that if we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them, they must become happy. My vision for CEI, it's quite simple. Wasting the labors of the people is, to me, nothing more than wasting our freedom to prosper. And CEI defends that freedom every damn day. Why? It's pretty simple. Because the freedom to prosper is quite literally everything. It defines our country and all of our possibilities. Now, for some, it's the freedom to pursue a hobby. And for others, to create wealth, whether by investing one's savings or risking it all on a new adventure. Or it may mean starting charities to fight human trafficking and cure AIDS. Why do we do all that? Well, that's the big question, right? To what end? It's because these pursuits allow us to realize our dreams. And pursuing these dreams, by doing that, we create jobs for thousands. We soothe shattered souls. We open the doors that commence a virtuous cycle of prosperity and liberty. CEI does what Jefferson hoped for. We thwart the waste of people's labors. And in doing so, we uphold that freedom to prosper, aspiring to a future of longer lives and cleaner air instead of major disease. A future of sunset walks with loved ones instead of holding down 2 jobs to pay the taxes. That is a pretty good narrative, and it is our narrative. So tonight, on behalf of CEI, I welcome you. I'm grateful you are here to celebrate free enterprise and economic liberty and the tough fight to preserve it. I also want to give a very special thank you to each of our hosts, our sponsors, individuals and businesses and foundations, because you have actually helped make this dinner the most successful CEI has ever had. And we've raised $1.069 million tonight. And that makes it possible for us to keep doing what we do. Let me just close by saying to those of you in public office who are against us, there's a few of you, let me just say, please use your actual email address. Because we're really, really good at finding out if you don't. And just email us at richardwindsor@cei.org. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
If I remember correctly, when the Simon-Ehrlich bet was settled, Paul Ehrlich wrote Julian Simon a check for, if I remember correctly, the amount was $576.07, which Simon never cashed. He kept it as a trophy, so to speak. What we've seen over the last couple of centuries is a society that has cashed the check of modern economic growth to the tune of increased life expectancy, to the tune of healthier people, to the tune of more income, to the tune of the arts. And the person who best explains that right now among scholars working is Deirdre McCloskey. Deirdre McCloskey is a widely recognized economic historian who holds appointments in a number of departments at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's written on the rhetoric in society and the social sciences, the economic history of Great Britain and the world, valid and invalid methods of statistical inference, and a number of other issues. My goal as a scholar is to someday be able to say that I have read as many great articles and great books as Professor McCloskey has written. A spirited and wide-ranging defense of free market capitalism makes Deirdre McCloskey a worthy recipient of an award named for Julian Simon. One gets a sense of wonder about the sheer awesomeness, and I mean that in an almost theological sense, of the wonders of competitive enterprise from reading books like The Bourgeois Virtues and Bourgeois Dignity. Like Julian Simon, Deirdre McCloskey is asking and answering the most important questions not only in the social sciences, but the most important questions in history. Specifically, Professor McCloskey's ongoing project on the bourgeois era seeks to explain the most important secular event in history, the great enrichment of the last 2 or 3 centuries that has seen massive increases in standards of living in countries that have adopted what we call the bourgeois deal of liberty and dignity for competitive enterprise, for the mundane bourgeois activities of buying, selling, inventing, and innovating. It's a deal that enriched the United States and Great Britain in the 19th century. It enriched Taiwan and South Korea in the 20th. It's enriching China and India today, and it promises the same for the rest of the world should they choose to accept the deal. I'm honored to count Deirdre McCloskey among my most profound influences and greatest mentors. But most importantly, I'm honored to count Deirdre McCloskey among my friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to give you the 2013 winner of the Julian Simon Award, Deirdre McCloskey.
Well, I'm honored, shocked, flattered. Sorry about my voice. It's my voice. I think it sounds sort of like Lauren McCall, don't you think? I'm amazed to be here. I've been a economist and historian, English professor and philosopher for a long time, and I've been so thrilled to find in my older years a project that inflames me, that excites me, trying to answer what I regard as the main question of the social sciences, which is, why are we so rich? I look around this room and I don't see any, it's a little hard to see with all these lights, but I don't see any descendants of the crowned heads of Europe or Africa or Asia. Maybe there are, but there are not too many. Most of us are descended, I suppose, from very, very poor people. And here we are at the CEI dinner. Amazing. And what has astonished me is the answer I've discovered. Now the problem is I'm a little worried because I'm delighted at the answer. Because the answer is that we're rich because we're free. And we're rich because we honor each other, because we value each other. So it turns out that the bulk, I think the overwhelming bulk, of the historical and economic evidence is that the engine of economic growth is not investment or exploitation or empire, or even the current fashion at the World Bank of institutions, but it's ethics. It's believing in ourselves and honoring ethical behavior in each other, in having what I call in my books dignity and liberty. So, it's a special pleasure to get this marvelous award from an institution that believes above all in human dignity and human liberty. Thank you very much.
I love the award. Thank you.
uncomfortable position of introducing someone who to this group needs no introduction. Let me just tell you what Ed Crane wrote about him. He is hopelessly optimistic. He doesn't just think he can sell freezers to Eskimos. He thinks he can sell medical savings accounts to Hillary Clinton. I'm of course talking about Fred Smith. I asked his staff to send me some notable things about him. Fred, you don't know this. And so let me just read you a few of the more amusing things they told me about him. Well, actually, some of them are really serious. Did you know that he participated in 2 peace marches in Washington, D.C. in the late 1960s? Not surprising if you know him, but he has a signed receipt from Dr. Martin Luther King thanking him for his support of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1963 for $10. He and Fran took judo together, and she impressed her mother by flipping him over the coffee table. I wish I had a video of that. He didn't eat salad until he was 15 years old. Who does that? Whose parents let them do that? I don't know. He was the jitterbug dance champion at his high school. And this is my favorite. He ran for college office on the slogan, "Free love and nickel beer." I thought it might have been free beer and nickel love, but not sure. Ed, in his remarks almost 20 years ago now that he wrote, finished with this beautiful tribute, I thought, to you. He said, "The beauty of him is driven by a genuine love of liberty. That's one reason why even those who disagree with him admire him so much. His enthusiasm for the ideas that drive him is, if not contagious, wholly honest and admirable. Now the truly interesting thing about this despairing optimist is that he's very, very smart. I'd say brilliant, were it not for his table manners." Those are Ed's words, not mine. And now, before Fred speaks, the staff of CEI has a special surprise video for him. So we'll take that away.
CEI isn't like any other think tank. What makes it unique is that Fred's personality is all over it.
It's a place unlike any other.
Principled,
Feisty,
forward-looking,
irreverent,
exuberant,
awesome.
Fred is a genius, yes. I think a lot of the people here are very bright, so he's attracted that sort of person to the organization.
But what he gets is that you can't sustain a project like this on sort of efficiency, rugged individualism, or anything like that. It's sort of ultimately an act of friendship, and he gets that, and the rest of us are grateful.
Well, I think Fred, as everyone knows, is a bubbly person.
Talking with Fred is like having a conversation with a fire hydrant. Totally overwhelming, and you're left drenched with ideas you've never heard before.
Is very gregarious and very positive, very future-oriented.
You know, you fall into his orbit, it's very hard to fall out of it.
Not everyone knows this, but Fred originally came to DC to work for the EPA.
During that period, became disillusioned with central planning and technocratic approaches.
And in 1984, he founded the Competitive Enterprise Institute.
He had one employee who would, at 9 o'clock in the morning, knock on the door, and he and Fred would work from our dining room table.
The outfit grew, and it grew on me, and Fred grew with it.
I wanted to be part of a feisty, edgy, free market think tank. And over the years, CI has gotten more feisty, more edgy, and even more free market.
It is a place that people like to be. It is a place where people have fun.
CEI is well known for enjoying itself while we fight for liberty.
You could sort of feel the vibrancy and the energy in the place, and that was all very rewarding.
One of my earliest experiences with Fred
sitting in his office trying to go through some letters. He is talking to 3 other people, dials his phone on speaker. It's ringing. He's talking, holding 3 different conversations at the same time. The person at the other end of the phone answers, and Fred says, who is this? Who did I call?
This is a pretty hilarious office sometimes.
When I came to CEI for an interview in 2008, and in the course of the conversation, I mentioned market failure, and Fred immediately called me a statist. And I knew at that point that this is where I wanted to work.
Fred is principled, honorable, and dedicated.
I was in Fred's office when he got a call from the Secretary of Transportation. This is pretty impressive, I thought, but it was nothing compared to what happened several minutes later. First, Fred started arguing with the secretary, then he got angry, then Fred slammed the phone down on the secretary. This is really good, I thought, and actually it was a nice lesson for the future. When you're done speaking truth to power and you're not getting anywhere, put down the phone.
We take very seriously our work on behalf of advancing capitalism, advancing free enterprise, but we do it in a way that's not only going to be fun, but it's going to make a difference.
We have a unique approach that really can change the world. Fred's helped change the world. We will continue to change the world. That's what CEI is here for.
And Fred is very excited to hand over the reins to Lawson.
Even though he's not running the day-to-day operations, Fred is still here, fighting the fight.
Fred has been and remains a trailblazer in this movement.
Thanks, Fred.
Fred, thanks so much.
Well, Fred, thank you for entrusting me with CEI.
Fred, thanks for everything, and God bless.
And now the man, Fred Smith.
Well, wait a minute now. You know, I'm from the South, and in the South, men don't cry. So let's stop this stuff pretty soon now. Well, thank you all. That was a wonderful... Fran, you didn't even mention it, damn it. I mean, okay. Well, what can I say? I appreciate it. I'm very, very happy that we've had, as Lawson said, one of the probably unique transfers of power in an organization, in the sense that we knew a long time ago that if we wanted to continue an organization, it would have to be a transfer. And we thought seriously about it, and eventually we hope we can do a manual on that. My assistant, Amanda France, was working on that for a long time, and we're hoping we can get back to that in the future and try to present that. But that's not what I wrote a talk for you guys, and I should give it now. You know, this is my last dinner speech, maybe not with that kind of an accolade. Maybe I can do it again. But you know, if you think about it, the Bond theme is a useful way of talking about the overall part of CEI. It expresses danger, excitement, some pretty nasty characters, and a bit of heroism. And if you think about what you've just heard, but also what you know about CEI, that pretty much characterizes the way we view Washington, the way we respond to its dangers. I could have made another pitch. I could have had another movie, Mr. Smith Comes to Washington. You know the story. Jimmy Stewart is elected. He goes to Washington, and he's shocked. What a horrible world politics is. Well, you know, I'm from Louisiana, so I didn't have that problem. Louisiana, every man a king, Huey Long, populism, tax the rich. When I got here, I felt exactly at home. You see, those of you who don't know Louisiana, Louisiana is a state that does not tolerate corruption. We insist upon it. It was funnier before you look at what happened to the economy in Louisiana. But then as now, and we've heard a little of this now, I was an egalitarian in the only moral sense of that word, as one who believes in a world with opportunities for all. Louisiana, when I was a kid growing up, was still very heavily under segregation. And I didn't think that was a good idea. And in my 4th grade class, I wrote my first civil rights paper. It was in allegorical terms, of course. It was about the friendship between a white rabbit and a black rabbit. I was trying to be subtle, and but my teacher saw right through it, dragged me into the principal's office where I was reprimanded, and that was an experience I was going to have happening increasingly through my academic career. I met Fran Bavona, who you've seen the lovely pictures of, but that was her maiden name. We were both at a freshman mixer at Dominican College, and I looked across the room and saw this very attractive young woman engaged in this large public policy debate, political debate. Well, of course, a beautiful woman interested in public policy. It was love at first sight. We continued dating through college, and this September, Fran and I will celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. Now, don't misunderstand. I wasn't bringing that up as some sort of traditional value thing, although that was true too. The point is, and this is a policy point, alliances can prove sustainable. That's the important point. When I came to Washington, D.C., as Wayne just pointed out, I joined the newly created EPA. Now, EPA, if you think about it in retrospect, is a typical Bond villain. They sought to gain control over the flows of all energy and material in our society, possibly the world, to minimize man's evil on our planet. And I, then still a knee-jerk liberal, wanted to help them. A few years later, though, older, less naive, increasingly disillusioned with the regulatory state, and increasingly aware of how insane it was to try to run anything, certainly the world, out of Washington, D.C., I would have razed EPA to the ground. That might have been a good thing, but still I do credit EPA with one thing. They turned me from a knee-jerk liberal into a libertarian, and that's worthwhile remembering. I entered the libertarian world formally through the Council for a Competitive Economy. I loved my job, loved my boss, but the council ran out of money, and so I had to seek new employment. At the council, I'd pioneered a novel form of analysis and advocacy, a sort of a vertical integration model. I enjoyed it, and so I shopped it around to everybody I knew who might hire someone like me. There were no takers. People thought it was an intriguing concept, but not their cup of tea. But they all thought it would be a good idea if I launched a new group. Well, that was a pretty frightening prospect, but in March 1984, as we've been told, I did form CEI. By then, I was channeling Hayek, who had convinced me that while ideas had consequences, the intellectuals who craft them are prone to the fatal conceit. The narrators of the stories that influence the future can do great damage to that future. The 20th century demonstrates that quite well. Certainly a century of ideas, but the ideas that emerged from that century were Nazism, fascism, imperialism, communism, socialism, none of them particularly great ways of helping mankind. I realized that if good ideas were to prevail, we had to do more than just think about things, we had to get active. My slogan, and some of you have heard it, and all of you have probably heard it one time or another, I made the point that you can write some very exciting sex manuals, but that doesn't produce babies. There's more involved, and we had to realize that. CEI would thus not only develop intellectual ideas, but also market and advance them in the policy battlefields. But making CEI, that concept of CEI, into a reality was still not an easy task. And here, another advantage of the marriage alliance concept became clear. Fran had an excellent job and agreed to advance me the revenues needed to launch CEI. Fortunately, CEI's revenues soon increased, allowing us to hire some people, expand a bit, and achieve some important successes, and very importantly, repay our original angel investor, Francis Smith. So. For 29 years, CEI has grown in skill, in staff, and resources, and we've always, and I think you've heard that over and over again, punched above our weight. But still, CEI has more to do. The struggle does continue, and my goal, as you've heard, is to stay in that struggle. My role at CEI will be to address the challenges posed by Joseph Schumpeter's Can Capitalism Survive essay. If you recall, his answer was not a snowball's chance in hell. His view was that too many intellectuals would favor statism, that too many businessmen would find politics too confusing, too distasteful, and would stay out and would not engage. But recall, Schumpeter was Germanic, and therefore naturally too pessimistic. The success of CEI and other policy groups indicates quite firmly that not all intellectuals drink the collectivist virus. There are now a large number of intellectuals who support economic liberty at CEI and throughout the movement. And increasingly, many businessmen realize that politics is threatening their ability to create wealth. True, businessmen too often remain defensive, apologetic even. But I think we should understand why that is. From the muckrakers of 1880s to the Michael Moores of today, there's been a tsunami of negative narratives sweeping over the business community. Is there any reason, is there any surprise that a lot of businessmen just want to walk away? Reardon in Atlas Shrugged, if you recall, wanted nothing to do with politics. Crafting an alliance, therefore, to advance economic liberty will be a challenge. Our intellectuals must do more to draw free market businessmen out of their defensive crouch. Business leaders must seek out allies in the free market policy community. And I think CEI is a wonderful base to launch that alliance building effort. To reach out, to help ourselves and others build positive narratives about what business does right in the political role, what business does right to address market failure problems, to reach to them and then use that to reach the entrepreneurial community and enlist them in an effort to fight jointly to recover some of the economic terrain that's been lost over the last century. And of course, when that is done, to create an alliance of doers and thinkers. I hope that many of you will be a part of that alliance and that you, unlike those who voyage out to Davos, will not be apologizing for capitalism, but rather doing something truly revolutionary, advancing it. Ours will be a Davos in exile, exactly. As I move into my new role, I'd like to thank, this is just like our tech that Lawson was doing. I want to thank everybody who's been at CEI before and all of the new people, especially President Lawson. This is one of those wonderful situations where I'm not leaving my family, it's growing bigger. I would also like to thank CEI's donors, both those who are here tonight and those who weren't able to attend. We all know that policy wars require resources, and the donations from the groups who like what we're doing help us are critically important for the successes. We owe a lot of thanks to them too. We should thank them. Well, we're soon going to watch the annual dinner movie, the Bond theme movie, and I want to say the Bond theme is flattering. I've always fancied myself somewhat akin to Sean Connery, although a little shorter, yes. Incidentally, although we've both grown a bit older, grayer, and wiser, but the parallels, as most of you know, are not perfect. I've not yet made the list of the sexiest over 70 that Sean did hit, but I'm sure People's Magazine will be calling at any moment, and I'm equally sure that when they do call, the NSA will know about it before I do. So. I should point out, too, that marriage does have restrictions. Fran has already nixed the idea of working more intimately with the Bond girls. But enough. Tonight's theme is about heroism, but it's also about succession and continuity. Sean Connery was the first Bond hero. Today it's Daniel Craig. Smith and Lawson, makes sense. Continuity would change. I've been in CEI headquarters, and now I'm moving out into the field, and I do so confidently knowing that the fort is being held and defended adequately by Lawson. And I recognize that my new role will take all the energies and passions for liberty that Bond displayed in his movies. I still have the energy, and God knows I have the passion, and I'm certainly looking forward to my new roles. Thank all of you for all you've done. Now, Samuel. Thanks for being
here. You guys have been so great. I really think you're gonna love this video. If you don't, talk to Lawson. Otherwise, here we go.
So it's you. You're the mole. How much did they pay you to spy for the regulatory establishment?
Dude, why are you wearing a skirt?
It's a kilt.
It's totally a skirt.
Well, you just got yourself kilt.
Frightening, isn't it?
I've never even heard of some of these outfits. Look at this one. The Committee for the Implementation of Textile Agreements.
That one is small but powerful, much like myself.
And each one of these government organizations is controlled by Spectre.
Spectre's behind them all. Spectre has been behind all of the anti-market policies for the last century.
The FTC's antitrust witch hunts, the FDA's rapacious attempts at product removal, even the FCC's attempts to nationalize the internet.
Spectre has been infiltrating our own government to wage war against capitalism. It's up to us to fight back. Now that you're Chief of Operations for the Competitive Espionage Institute, you're going to need to know what's really going on.
Oh, hey guys.
Obviously, everyone has a covert identity and a secret mission. We're up against a lot, but you'll find that we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve. This is Q. Q has some wonderful new toys.
So tell me, Q, what is this?
This is one of the most powerful lasers known to man. But let me show you something really interesting. This is a pencil. The pencil is a miracle, a marvel of the modern world. Do you know how to make this pencil? No, you don't, because this pencil is actually a 3D camera, a voice recorder, a homing device, a DVD maker, and a widow maker.
These are our 007 bartenders, Bill Vallance and Jack Strangeways. They work to pull together people of all political persuasions to fight Spectre. Their weapon? Alcohol.
What would you like, sir? Our menu.
I'll have a martini stirred.
We don't have that, sir.
Fine, I'll have it shaken, not stirred.
Mr. Bader, for too long CEI has thwarted Spectre's evil plan to destroy American capitalism. Frankly, I find your staff unnecessarily principled. There's money and power in the regulation game, you know? I'm hoping you'll be more reasonable, more compromising, unlike your predecessor.
You're wasting my time, Blowhard.
It's Blofeld.
Whatever. I too am unnecessarily principled.
CEI remains in excellent hands. There's nothing you can do to stop us now.
Mr. Bader, be reasonable.
The name's not Bader. It's Bond. James Bond.